Tom Parker Bowles was reportedly frog-marched off a royal estate in broad daylight, but that's not even the part that should worry Camilla. The real damage happened 90 seconds later, on a phone call that allegedly stripped away every ounce of authority she spent 2 decades building. And by the time that call ended, sources suggest the whole room understood something about her that was never supposed to come out. Here's how it reportedly unfolded. William had already ordered a full financial audit of the duchy months earlier. Quietly, without a single headline attached to it, what it uncovered was staggering. Tom had allegedly been running private commercial bookings on duchy land for years, corporate dinners, sponsor mixers, invite-only experiences, and pocketing the proceeds while the estate absorbed the damage. Historic buildings worn down by outside catering rigs, security gaps torn wide open by guest lists, nobody vetted, money bleeding out of an estate that was never his to touch. That audit sat on William's desk like a loaded weapon, waiting for the right moment. The moment came when Charles and Camilla left for a state visit to the United States. The instant their plane cleared British airspace, Tom allegedly began testing the waters, small private dinners at the duchy, nothing flashy, just seeing how much rope he had. When the King and Queen consort returned, Charles walked straight into the Chelsea Flower Show, cameras trained on him from every angle, Alan Titchmarsh and David Beckham soaking up the coverage. Tom reportedly looked at that wall of noise and decided nobody with real authority was watching the countryside, so he went bigger, much bigger. He booked the hall, he hired the caterers, he hung a crest on the wall that looked almost exactly like the royal one, close enough to impress, different enough to dodge a lawsuit. He plugged his equipment straight into the estate's power supply, like a man who owned the deed. Guests filed in that night, believing they were buying access to the crown itself. Before we get into what happened when the doors flew open, hit subscribe to channel name. We're tracking every move in this story as it breaks, and you don't want to miss what Camilla says on that call. All right, back to the gala. Rain was hammering the windows. Inside, Tom drifted between his investors with a wine glass in hand, completely unbothered, like a man standing in his own living room. He had no idea Edward's men were already inside the building. They'd gone straight to the kitchens first, cables were pulled, equipment was tagged and logged, catering staff were quietly told to step back from their stations. The whole operation was unraveling before a single guest noticed anything wrong, and then Tom looked up and saw Edward standing at the entrance, perfectly still, watching him. Something in Tom's face changed, but instead of backing down, he squared up, raised his glass, and crossed the room with a grin. "You're trespassing," he said, loud enough for every guest to hear. "This gala runs under the Queen Consort's authority." Edward said nothing. And that silence apparently rattled Tom more than any comeback could have. Tom had never respected Edward, thought him stiff, forgettable, a man who'd spent his life following rules nobody else bothered with. And now, with a captive audience and years of resentment sitting behind his teeth, he reportedly couldn't stop himself. He allegedly called Edward a title with no weight behind it, a man reduced to running errands for a nephew who couldn't be bothered to show up in person. He told the room the monarchy's future belonged to people like him, people with connections, not men clinging to inherited relevance. He said the old guard was finished and didn't know it yet. Edward let him finish every word. Then he spoke, low enough that people leaned in just to hear him. He said the land beneath their feet belonged to the Prince of Wales, not the Queen Consort, not her son, not anyone borrowing her name. He gave Tom 60 minutes to clear every piece of equipment and every guest off the property, or face arrest for trespassing on sovereign land. Then he turned and gave the nod. The lights in the kitchen went first. Wine crates were carried out the door. The imitation crest came down off the wall. Guests sat frozen, watching in total silence. Tom's face went scarlet. He snapped at his assistant, and within minutes a call was patched through. Camilla, furious, demanding Edward stand down immediately. She said she'd handle this privately, that dragging her son through a public scene was unnecessary and cruel. Edward took the phone from his aide's hand and hung up while she was still mid-sentence. The room went silent. They'd just watched the Queen Consort get cut off mid-play. Tom didn't leave quietly. As the wardens walked him toward the exit, he allegedly turned and unloaded, calling Charles a man who'd waited 40 years for a throne, now being quietly run by his own son, calling William controlling and paranoid, calling Edward a hollow man on loan. Then came the threats that he'd heard things inside those walls never meant for outside ears, that he knew things about Harry, about Kate, about all of them, and if this was the fight they wanted, they'd better be ready for what it cost. The door shut on him. Nobody in that room moved to help. Minutes later, Camilla called back, and this time her tone had shifted entirely. Gone was the command. What remained was something smaller, something raw. She reportedly stopped defending the gala altogether and started pleading for her son's future, asking Edward to let the trespass go unrecorded, to keep it out of any official file, to let this end quietly instead of following Tom for the rest of his life. Edward listened just long enough to understand exactly what he was hearing. Then he ended the call mid-plea. And that's the part that should terrify Camilla most. Not the scandal, not the headlines. The room she was pleading in was full of London's most connected people, the kind who trade in exactly this sort of thing. That call was never staying contained. By morning, it was reportedly moving through London on its own. What it exposed was simple. Camilla's authority was never hers. It was borrowed from Charles's affection and everyone's fear of crossing him. The instant William acted through constitutional right, none of that mattered anymore. She wasn't the Queen Consort in that final call. She was just a mother, out of leverage, out of ground to stand on. Tom, meanwhile, has nothing left to stand on either. Every investor in that room now knows his access was never real, borrowed power, and the person who lent it just took it back. William has the audit, he has the timeline, and when he decides to use it, there won't be anywhere left for either of them to hide. This was never a family spat that spiraled. This was a line being drawn, and neither Tom Parker Bowles nor Camilla is standing on the right side of it.